Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of Locked On Raptors here on a Friday to close out the week. And on today's show, we are talking about the Raptors' preseason loss last night to the Philadelphia 76ers. We're going to talk about OG Anunoby. Probably, I think almost certainly the most important piece of this game was his performance. We're going to talk about that. We're going to dig into Gary Trent Jr.'s preseason debut and how it went, and not terribly great returns so far from Gary Trent Jr., and a whole bunch of other takeaways from the Raptors preseason game. And we're joined by Yahoo Sports Canada's Ben Carlos for his podcast debut. We're going to talk to him and have a good time, and hopefully he's a return guest. Hopefully I don't scare him away on today's episode of Locked On Raptors, coming up in just 1 second.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1032 of Locked On Raptors for Friday, October the 8th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the podcast at Locked On Raptors, and you can subscribe to the podcast on all of your favorite podcast providers. Follow on some other podcast providers. They all have different nomenclature, but either way, it's the same idea. Please support the show on all your favorite apps. And also, you can find us on YouTube. We are free on all platforms, both video and audio. So please go sub to the page. We're over 825 now, I think, in terms of subs. We're pushing towards 1,000, so please continue to do so. It's much appreciated when you support the show. All right, on today's show, we are talking about the Raptors' preseason loss last night to the Sixers, 125-113 down in Philly, and we are joined by a first-time guest of the show from Yahoo Sports Canada's brand new crack team of incredible NBA and Raptors coverage folks. It is Ben Carlos. Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm feeling a little horny, Sean. How about you?
You don't need to be talking about my tweets this early on in the podcast. People...
It was one of those things when I saw you too. I was like, is that no, that has to be a typo, right? But then you're like, okay, no, you haven't been listening for a while. I was like, I clearly haven't, because this is clearly something that's like no one reacted to. I'm like, huh? But
yeah. For clarity, last night, if you're not poisonously online, which I hope you're not, if you're listening to the podcast, it's better for your health. I tweeted during the game as OG Anunoby was putting up 22, 4 and 4 on 8 of 14 shooting, something along the lines of everything OG has done tonight has been exceptionally horny. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that's just basic, standard fare for me. That's kind of light in terms of the genitalia talk I'll work into the timeline. But Ben Carlos, of course, recently became mutuals with one another, and it was a new awakening, a new arrival to my Twitter account, and I'm glad you've been indoctrinated now, Ben. We can continue on forth with the podcast.
Absolutely.
So on today's show, we're going to talk about OG Anunoby off the top, because that's the big thing from last night, I think, and kind of the big thing from this entire preseason. And if I'm being honest, we're also going to dig into some of the other performances. Svi Mykhailiuk is someone I want to talk about. He really seems to be making a claim for not just a roster spot, but a rotation spot out of the gate. Gary Trent Jr. made his debut last night. Mixed reviews there. And we'll dig into some other takeaways from sort of the roster battle guys at the back of the roster as well. But Ben, let's start with OG. Last night, again, 22, 4 and 4, 8 of 14 shooting, 2 of 2 from the line, 4 steals as well, just 2 turnovers. I mean, it's 2 games in a row. It's the preseason. Again, every caveat, just envision this podcast as being a large bubble bath, and we're throwing in a giant salt bomb, like a Himalayan salt bath bomb or something like that. That's the grain of salt you're taking with everything you see in the preseason. But I think it's notable that OG kind of continued to do what he did in the first preseason game, except this time with more defensive attention paid his way in the form of Joel Embiid. And, he responded by passing out of double teams, passing when he got in trouble, passing when Joel Embiid was all over him, scoring when he felt like it, off the bounce and catch and shoots and all of that. Really impressive stuff from OG for the second time in a row. What were your overall impressions of OG's game last night against the Sixers, Ben?
Have you ever seen the movie Captain Phillips?
Of course I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically OG was the Somali pirate, and looking at the rest of the team is like, I'm the captain now, because he's playing with such confidence. And I feel like it's because for the past, he's going into his 5th year now. He's been giving a little bit more by the coaching staff every year, and his usage has increased. And now I feel like since he's one of the three pillars of the team, the other two being Fred and Pascal, they're kind of like, okay, here, just go. And then he's delivering, he's putting up numbers. And I said it last night, in the heat of the whole Raptors Twitter world, which I'm still somewhat new to. He's playing like baby Kawhi right now. Like he's like, people love making the OG Kawhi comparisons, but like it's never felt more present than it was last night. Like I feel like this season is really going to be the season that OG starts to really come into his own. And I wouldn't be surprised if he led the team in scoring.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. That's kind of been a topic of conversation for a couple of days now. Just like among sort of Raptors online circles. I still think Pascal is going to lead the team in scoring. I think Pascal is just a more sort of refined scorer at this point. And I do think it's worth kind of exercising a little bit of caution with just like heaping all of the expectation on OG based on preseason games and sort of what happened last year. But you're right. Like the things that he's showing, and this is what we've been looking for, right? Is can he scale up the usage and maintain the efficiency? That's going to be the thing to watch all season long. And again, it's 2 preseason games, but he's continued the trend of his entire career at this point, where every time there's an incremental increase in his usage, he maintains the efficiency. And obviously, this is the most difficult step to make. I think he was a 19.3% usage guy last year, and I think that's going to go up to 24, 25 this year, most likely, maybe even higher in the time that they're waiting for Pascal to get back. We're not going to be able to know until we see it, obviously, in a larger scale. But all the signs point to every time he kind of levels up and adds a little bit more in terms of responsibility, the efficiency doesn't struggle. And that is really encouraging through 2 preseason games. And I think the passing last night was what got me, Ben. I mean, he only had the 1 assist in the first preseason game, had 4 last night, and just really seems to kind of know where everybody is on the floor at all times. There was one possession where, I think he was trying to ISO against Embiid, which was a bold decision. And it almost looked like he might shake him for a second, but didn't quite pull it off. But he kind of, turned around, took a second, realized, okay, I got nowhere to go, and made a nice fire up to the top of the key and kept the possession moving. Had a couple nice, big to big assists when he kind of got at the teeth of the defense and extra help came his way. And all right, I'll slide it to Precious Achiuwa, and that's easy enough. What were your sort of overall impressions of his playmaking? And is that to you maybe like the most important thing here this season? Obviously the scoring is big, but the playmaking that comes off of the increased scoring load, that's what makes stars, and I think we've seen some pretty promising early returns, again, with all the caveats applying because it's the preseason.
Of course. I feel like he really picked his spots well there. Like you said, his playmaking abilities have greatly improved compared to, previous seasons past. But I think with losing Kyle, you're going to have the rest of those guys. I mean, of course, Fred's going to be the floor general here, but you're going to but everyone else is going to also have to start. It can't just be Fred. And I think OG proved that he can be very dependable on that side of the ball for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really intrigued to see how that kind of continues. And as the spacing improves, as they add in Siakam and just kind of have a little bit more in terms of threat on the floor, that I think is going to really kind of help expand things. I'm looking forward to the trial by fire for OG in the early part of the season. Like it's going to be a lot. I'm expecting some serious growing pains in that first month with no Pascal, but I'm really intrigued by how that kind of seasons him for later on in the year. Did you have any other OG takeaways from last night? I mean, his defense was really strong as well. Anything kind of lingering? I just feel like we could talk about OG basically all day, every day. He's so freaking good.
Yeah. Plus, Raptors fans love OG content. So
yes,
I guess though, I honestly, I feel like the one thing that really stuck out to me was, I don't know if you saw that image of him right when it was pretty much garbage time already. He was just sitting on the bench and he just it had that mean mug expression of like, oh man, if I don't know how to get into it without getting into expletives. So
I it's just exciting stuff. Obviously, we need to see more and continue to sort of season him along here. But like, it's not like the Sixers were throwing nothing at him, right? Like, yeah, the double teams, that's going to be a thing we see a lot. And as he continues to kind of add to his, pull-up game and his sort of overall floor game, the doubles are going to become more of a constant because he's going to be kind of the hub of the Raptors offense in concert with Fred. And how he responds to those is going to be fascinating. Let me ask you this. What was your reaction just physically, maybe audibly, when OG hit that pull-up three? I think in the second quarter, he was kind of like doing the lazy guy to sleep kind of dribble up top and then just suddenly pops it and nails it. What was your reaction when you were watching that live?
I was like, is this OG Anunoby? What is going on? Because it's like to see him do those pull-ups, I'm like, is this the same guy we've been watching all these years? But it goes to show it's a testament to his growing confidence and him putting in the work, right? And then one of the quotes that myself personally, I live by, that one of my friends kind of instilled in me last year is it's when okay, what's the exact? I might butcher this. Oh, gotcha. So it doesn't really tie to luck, but luck is when opportunity meets preparation. Right. And this is more so, obviously this is less luck, but this is the opportunity for OG meeting all the work he's put in. So
yeah. No, that's well put. Yeah.
I butchered that. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine, dude. It's you're still working on the coffee. It's fine. I've never had my thoughts together. So you're well
like
ahead
my
of
mug.
Me. It's a beautiful mug. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I need to get myself a good Raptors mug. I got my King Cake Baby mug courtesy Katie Heindel coming soon. So
right on.
Anyway,
shout out to Katie.
Yeah, we're gonna continue talking about OG all through the preseason. I'm sure. I personally, my audible reaction when OG hit that was like a little cackle. Like he's becoming a guy who I start cackling over.
Yeah,
it's kind of replaced Kyle Lowry as the chief cackle inducer on the Raptors, which is quite exciting. Either way, we'll leave that there for OG at the moment, and we will continue on and talk about more of our takeaways from the game, including the guard rotation and Gary Trent Jr. and Goran Dragic and how it's all kind of coming together here. We'll get to that in 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Sleeper. It is fantasy basketball time. You're like 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away from the start of your season. You're probably doing drafts very soon. And I'm imploring you to download Sleeper and use their game pick style of game for all your leagues this year. Look, you might like the busy work of fantasy basketball. You might have had the illusion that you like the daily busy work of fantasy basketball. Nobody actually likes it. You would rather just pick your lineup one day a week, figure it out, and then set it and let it be and go win you some games. That's what you can do with Sleeper with Game Pick, where owners pick a single game per week for each starter to count towards their team's total score, ensuring an even number of games played between opponents. The days of losing because your opponent's players simply played more scheduled games than you are over. The days of mindless busy work are over, and you actually get to have strategy in your fantasy basketball as opposed to just playing a math game. You get to pick your matchups based on player matchups, home versus away, opponent defensive ranking, pace of play, and more. All of that adds up to more strategy and less busy work. Whether you prefer to redraft, you like your keeper, or your dynasty leagues, Game Picks has you covered. Sleeper has cracked the fantasy basketball code. If you like the weekly rhythm of fantasy football, which I prefer greatly to fantasy basketball, if you prefer building out a weekly strategy versus daily busy work, you're going to love Game Picks. Download the Sleeper app and start a league with your friends today. You will not be disappointed. All right, Ben, let's continue on here and dig into some of our other takeaways. So the Gary Trent Jr., we should maybe start with him. He was the topic of yesterday's podcast. He played last night for the first time. He took 12 shots, all of them jump shots of some varying length and degree. He's a shot maker at times. He's also a bad shot taker sometimes, and he kind of gets himself into some trouble. You pair that with Goran Dragic having a bit of a quiet night, 0 of 4 for him in 22 minutes, just 2 points, both from the line. That spot at the 2 guard is very much up for grabs, I think, and I don't really know how I feel about it just yet. I'm curious with you, Ben, based on what you've seen from Dragic and Trent in the game, and game for Trent and 2 for Dragic, based on just sort of the skill sets each guy brings to the table, where are you leaning right now in the question of who should start at the 2 when the Raptors begin the regular season?
I mean, if we're going to base this entirely off of last night, I think Svi's making a huge case for compared to how the other 2 played. But it's tricky because Gary Trent Jr. was one of the more frustrating players to watch last season because one night he'll put up 30 and then the very next night, he'll put up 4, right? Yeah. So I mean, you know, it's not the most ideal performance you'd like to see in, albeit, first preseason game. But it's like what we were discussing earlier about how off camera, how if you're paying a guy 18 million to score the basketball, you kind of want him to score the basketball. I was getting a little bit flashes of how angry the fan base would get with Danny Green when back in 2019, whenever his shot wouldn't be going, because it's like you had one job. Why aren't you doing that one job? And and it's a little bit frustrating too. Like you said, is like all of it came from just straight jump shots. So and then, I mean, if you want to throw it back even further, I don't know if I should go this far. It kind of reminds me of, like, you know, the Lou Williams days when he was just like, all right, let me ISO real quick. Let me run up the clock, jack up a shot. Oh no, it didn't go in.
Yeah, the Trent thing is weird, man, because I like the idea of having like a trigger man who's always happy to shoot. Like that's why Serge Ibaka was so effective on a team that had a lot of dudes who like to pass. It was kind of nice you could funnel things to a guy you knew was never ever going to pass. And I feel like Trent has kind of a similar vibe to him.
Yeah.
I just don't really know like what the Raptors coaching staff really envisions for him either, right? Like it's weird. Like we've heard all these stories over the years with Nick Nurse about how in practice they're like fine players for taking mid-rangers and you get negative points for taking mid-rangers and it's all about the threes and the layups. And it just seems weird that Gary Trent Jr. is given the liberty to be like, all right, I'm taking 8 mid-rangers today and that's just how I'm going to do it. Again, some of those go in, and it's a nice counter to the fact that he's not really a guy who can get all the way to the basket. And the fact that he has that little pull up at least is a nice little thing to have in his bag. But it's just kind of difficult to figure out the best place in which he fits in a lineup because he doesn't really, like the way he plays right now, it doesn't really fit into what the Raptors tend to want to do, right? Like they want to have movement. You know, Nick Nurse has talked about scoring with the system and how that's going to be how they have to score. But if you in the system, you have a guy who doesn't really fit into it, I don't really know like what the utility is. And like, I'm not saying that Gary Trent can't fit because I think his skill set suggests that he very much can fit. You know, he's a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He can handle the ball just a little bit as like a secondary, tertiary kind of guy. Like there's something there and the skill set should be able to slot in. Like in theory, a guy who shoots that well should fit with anybody, but it's just, it seems like he's got a little bit more rope from the coaching staff. And because of his like gunner tendencies, he kind of gets off kilter with what the team is trying to do. Does that make any sense? Like, are you similarly curious as to like what it is they actually want him to be within the team?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the Serge Ibaka comparison in terms of like when you're surrounded by guys who want to like move the ball around. It's nice to have that one like, you know, that one gunner to just kind of like shoot at will. The only problem is like if he's shooting at will and he's not making those shots, then you know we're at a little bit of a, you know, a little standstill here. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how his role develops throughout the season, and especially with you know, we mentioned Goran Dragic. He looked a little lost out there. I think that's one of those things he's still trying to figure out his place on the team as well. I was very surprised these past 2 preseason games to see him starting. I was a little bit based off of the season that we will pretend it never existed in Florida. I was surprised to see the 2-guard lineup, well, essentially 2-point guard lineup rolling in. You know, we had Lowry and Van Fleet last year, and then it's kind of like we're repeating that this year, except with Van Fleet and Lowry slot, and then Dragic in the shooting guard spot, which was interesting. But
yeah, it's so I totally get the reasoning for starting Dragic with Fred, particularly with Pascal not available, because that extra ball handling is important. Like you can't have your only 2 actual ball handlers being Fred and OG. That's just too much to put on them. And I know there's this sort of, you know, call to just throw Scotty Barnes into the starting 5, have Trent be at the 2, and just have Barnes be like your third ball handler. It's great. I'm totally on board with just throwing everything and seeing what he can handle. But also, if you're trying to win games and like be competitive while also developing, that's probably not the way to do it right now because Scotty Barnes is a 20-year-old rookie who's played 2 preseason games. Like it's going to be easy to heap too much expectation on him, I think, just based on the excitement around him and everything. And I think you got to kind of, you know, be measured about what you can actually expect from Barnes this season. And I think throwing him into the fire immediately and saying, all right, you're our third ball handler when we're out in these lineups, like that feels like a lot. So to me, starting Dragic gives you that extra ball handling. It allows Fred to play off ball a little bit more, which of course we know he's excellent at. I get it, but I do wonder if Trent is kind of wasted on the bench, right? And I think maybe Trent's better role is with those starters, and you kind of slide Dragic to the bench and you get to play him and Flynn together. Maybe they help balance each other out. You have the sort of long, stretchy dudes you'll have on the bench. Like, it's tricky, man. What do you prefer in terms of like Raptors starting 5 day one? Let's assume Chris Boucher's back in a week or two after the season begins. So, we can pencil him in as the starting 4 for now. Do you go with Dragic at the 2 because of the ball handling? Do you go with Trent? Like, what's your favorite configuration there to maximize both guys?
In my opinion, I feel like it makes more sense to have Dragic come off the bench and then be the secondary floor general with, with the second unit. And then, like you said, have Gary out there with the primary ball handler in like Fred. And then it would just be easier to hopefully help him get his shot going.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think for me, day one, if Siakam's not there, I'm okay with Dragic in the starting 5, but I do think like Trent is going to be at his best when he's playing next to Fred, Siakam, and OG. Like, he feels like the kind of guy who's lifted by good players.
Yes,
and when he's not surrounded by them, it's like, okay, this could be a little bit tricky. But I think there's a potential there for, if he's in that starting 5 with those 3 guys, he's going to get good looks, and he's not going to become a guy to whom the ball comes and the offense dies, because there's just too many other guys who are going to have the ball in their hands. Ben, we're going to continue on here. We're going to wrap up with some other thoughts. We're going to talk Svi. We're going to talk, some other dudes we saw. Scotty Barnes, we haven't really talked a whole lot about. It was kind of a quiet game for him, but we should still talk about Scotty Barnes because he's Scotty freaking Barnes. We'll get to that in 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline.ag, who are back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back on the field for another football season. As always, BetOnline is your #1 spot for all the pro and college football action this year. With new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the #1 source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, all one word, to get that bonus from football, basketball, hockey, baseball playoffs, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts. And today's show is brought to you by our pals over at Built Bar, who make the best tasting protein bars you're ever going to find. They've got 9 staple flavors: coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, cookies and cream, and German chocolate. If you don't know which one's your favorite, then you can order a mixed box. You get 2 of each of the 9 flavors, and you can decide for yourself which one you want to order a full box of, or a crate, or a drum, or whatever large measuring tool you'd like to fill full of Built Bars. Either way, all their bars are great tasting and healthy for you too. Just 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs as well. Amazing selection. Amazing flavors, all tasty, all healthy. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Ben, let's round this out with some quick hitters on some other guys from last night's preseason game for the Raptors. Again, a 125-113 loss. Let's start with Scottie Barnes. 3 of 7, 8 points, 3 boards, 5 assists, a steal. He wasn't his most sort of like outstanding game or anything like that, but I keep being really impressed by all the ways he affects the game, just kind of intangibly, right? Like the tip out rebounds and keeping possessions alive. He's just never stopping. He's always on the go, trying way too hard for the preseason. You love to see it. What were your sort of overall impressions of Scottie Barnes' second preseason effort last night, Ben?
I mean, he exudes just as much energy off the court than he does on the court. It's astounding, really. There was, first off, he has this like, he has no fear to shoot the ball, which is great. You love to see that from a rookie. But also when you go back, to piggyback off of the energy point, I think there's this one play where I think it was Precious who got a dunk in, and then I don't know if you saw Scotty, he was like clapping, like let's go, like over just a dunk, and it's just like, yo, Scotty, it's a preseason game. And it's like the first quarter, and that's the kind of energy you see for like a clutch play to kind of like, seal the game. But no, you just love to see it, especially, with Kyle gone, you have that missing void, that emptiness of like, you need someone to kind of fill in. Not saying that, Scotty's going to be filling in that role, but it's nice to see that refreshing energy to really make it feel like it's a new era of Raptors basketball.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, to the point of like filling in the void of Lowry, again, not to say that any one player on the team is filling in for Kyle Lowry, but the thing that Lowry did so well, in addition to just like all the things that made Lowry good, but were just like the little things that kind of ultimately affect the outcome of a game. And you have to fill in those like high IQ plays somewhere, because that's how you get wins on the margins, especially for a team that doesn't have a whole lot of margin for error. And, Fred's really good at that stuff. Obviously, he got really good in sort of on-court impact stuff last season after not being so hot in his first few years. And then I think Scotty just kind of seems like such a high IQ player, just seems to know where to be at all times, knows where his teammates should be, and knows those little kind of pockets to sneak in there, to grab an offensive rebound, to tip out a rebound to a waiting shooter. Like, he's just kind of got all of that just intangibly in his brain. And so, like, if you're talking about sort of looking ahead at what Scotty Barnes is going to be and projecting forward his development, it'd be nice if he could shoot right now and all that. That would be lovely. But the fact that he has the sort of sense and the awareness and the instincts and all that stuff down, that to me is harder to teach than learning how to shoot. And you can see exactly why the Raptors were like, okay, this guy's worth betting on. He's got the floor of like a really good role player who knows where to be at all times. If we can move this shot along, oh my God, things are going to get really intense really quickly. And I'm really curious to see just how he fits in as a role player this season more than anything else. I don't think this is a year where he's going to get to stretch his legs as like an on-ball star or anything like that. But, I made this point after the first game, and I think it's even clearer after last night. He's just going to be an excellent role player for this team in year one as he figures out all the other stuff. Any other guys who came to mind last night for you, Ben? I can kind of turn it to you here. Anyone that you specifically want to dive into?
Yeah, Svi was very, very impressive. It's like what we were saying when you were like between Gary Trent and Goran Dragic. Who's making the case to start? I'm like, none of the above. Because Svi, I mean, I feel like he was brought in to be, a 3-point shooter, but he showed last night that he's very much capable of doing more than that. And and I got to shout out to Raptors Instagram for coming up with the most badass nickname I've heard in a long time. Splash Bandicoot. Like, oh my God, that's just like, like if you played PlayStation as a kid, that's just brilliant. And then I was like, okay, if he's Splash Bandicoot, does that make Goran Spyro the Dragic? Like, it's just it just works so perfectly. Oh man.
Yeah, now we're working on a Raptors players as late 90s Nintendo characters podcast. That'll have to be a thing we do sometime. Svi, I think with last night's game, 11 points, 2 boards, 2 assists, 5 of 7 shooting. Like, I think he's on the team, like, very clearly. I mean, I know he's got like the guarantee for this year. I know that's been sort of a hint that maybe he was going to be on the team from Jump Street, but like an extra year guaranteed is not like a big deal if they don't really want him on the team. Like, he has the one guaranteed year. They could always waive him if they really, really wanted to. Nothing's prohibiting them from that. I don't think that's going to happen though, because he's been too good. And I think he's not just in line for a rotation spot. He's probably not in line for a roster spot. He's probably in line for a rotation spot, at least as they wait to assume full health. Like, Svi's nice. And the thing that really stood out to me is in that second quarter, and this happened in both second quarters of both preseason games, when he's in there with that sort of crazy crew of long dudes who are just young and energetic and wild, he's kind of the adult in the room and just kind of slows things down. And it's like, all right, guys, we've run enough here. I'm just going to run a nice little pick and roll, and we're going to slow things the hell down. That's kind of a nice thing to have in a lineup that is otherwise 100% erratic, crazy person energy, which you love, but you have to have that counterbalance. And I think Svi does that nicely. And, he kind of is doing the thing, again, preseason, but he's doing the thing that you would hope Gary Trent can do, right? Where he just kind of fills the gaps. He connects dots. He is a glue type player for a lineup that makes everything easier for everybody else because of what he can do offensively. it'd be nice to see Trent kind of assume that a little bit more. It's weird to say Trent needs to like mold his game after a guy he's better than, but like, the talent needs to match the role and all that stuff too with Trent. So yeah, it's interesting times watching Svi. I think he's very clearly made himself a roster spot and probably is going to get some minutes out of the gate. Quickly, just a couple quick hitters here. We saw Freddie Gillespie play 5 minutes last night. I don't know, man. I'm really rooting for the dude, but I just don't think he's going to be on this team. He is not an offensive threat in any way, and I don't think he's good enough defensively to justify having him out there. Do you have a more sunny outlook on Freddie Gillespie, Ben, or are you kind of in the same spot?
Oh, it's hard because I want to root for the guy so badly because he made such an impact when he got brought onto the team like last season, right? And then if you watch all the open gym clips, he seems like that personality that you'd love to have in the locker room.
Yeah.
Making Scotty LOL during like press conferences and whatnot. But if you base this off of like summer league performance as well as these 2 preseason games, it does not look good for him. Even watching the game with my dad last night, he was like, that guy doesn't know where to go. And I'm just like, I'm like, yeah, oh boy.
Yeah. That's the thing is, like, defensively, yeah, he can block a shot or two if he's like at the rim and he can meet guys there. He's obviously a good rebounder. He's got strong hands for that. But on offense, like, he just doesn't do any of the things that make a good low usage player, right? Like he doesn't set good screens. Like he kind of always misses his guy with his screens, it seems, doesn't create any separation for his guard. He doesn't present himself as a target at all when he's driving, when he's on the dive to the basket. And, you saw last night, he caught a pass in the pick and roll, brought the ball down first, and then got it blocked going back up. And it's just like, you're 6'9", 6'10", dude. Like you have enormous arms. Your wingspan is hilarious. Like there can be more vertical threat here, but he just doesn't seem to have that. And, there's nothing else to his offensive repertoire, right? Like he's not shooting the ball outside of, the restricted area, and he's not much of a passer. And it's tricky because there's very little utility to have a guy like that. Like you can have a low usage center who's out there setting really good screens and who, can make the extra pass and be a connector. He's not doing any of that stuff. And so I fear for Freddie Gillespie and his future with the team. Again, rooting for him extremely hard, but it has looked really rough so far in the preseason. And he just doesn't seem, as much as he has the height to match what the Raptors' vision is, he doesn't seem to have the skill set that the Raptors look for in their 6'9" guys, which is kind of disappointing. That feels like a pretty good place to leave it for today, unless you have any parting shots here, Ben. Anyone that you wanted to offer a last-minute thought on?
I want to offer up my last minute thought on you. First off, thank you for having me on and running this like a well-oiled machine, from start to finish. I was like, dang, the level of production and professionalism on here. I feel like I'm on ESPN or something. All right. Your boys made it. Let's go.
Yes. We talk about how horny we are on ESPN all the time.
No, but I appreciate you having me on and I guess taking my Raptors podcast virginity. So speaking on to we're on the subject of it. So
yeah, it's Friday, man. We can lean into it. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, man, it was lovely having you on the show. Thanks for being here. Hopefully we can do it again. And looking forward to all the great stuff you're going to have at Yahoo this year. Where can people check out all the stuff you guys got cooking?
Obviously, you can check us out Twitter, Instagram, Yahoo Sports Canada, especially YouTube. And then I guess for me personally, for all my steamy Raptors tweets, Ben J. Carlos on Twitter. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, same handle as well.
Awesome. The handle is right there on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, please go follow Ben. Ben is wonderful. And that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Your second listen of the day should be Locked on NBAs. They are covering everything around the preseason, all the big storylines to keep tabs on. Last night, one of the hosts of the Friday episode, Nick Angstadt, was shooting me a message and was like, hey, anything from this Raptors game I should know? And I just basically filled his DMs with 8 lines of OG propaganda. So you may hear OG talk on Locked on NBA today through Nick Angstadt. via me. So go check that out. On next week, so no Monday podcast. I'm away for Thanksgiving, but we'll be back for a 4-day week next week, Tuesday through Friday. Javon Shepard's going to come on the podcast. That's going to be great. And some friends or a friend or friends, perhaps, from a notable Canadian television show premiering on Sunday, October the 17th. We'll be back on the podcast. At least one of them will be back, and hopefully we have a second new debut guest paired with said guest. This is a weird, convoluted tease, but if you know what I'm talking about, you know, and it's going to be great. That's going to come up hopefully next Friday. We'll have Vivek on as well next week, Katie, all that fun stuff. But thank you so much for listening this week. Please go subscribe to the YouTube page. It's always very appreciated when you go ahead and do that. We are up near 830 subs. Let's keep on pushing that number towards 1,000, pretty please. And with that, we'll talk to you again on Tuesday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Have a great Thanksgiving weekend. Bye-bye.